You're listening to We Deepen Media.
Hey y'all, I have some exciting news to share. The We Deepen Podcast Network has expanded to include 2 new shows. First, Political Hope Podcast by Indy Reishi explores the lives, events, and minds pivotal for human evolution. Not always overtly political, Political Hope is intended to empower you to recognize your inherent voice and ability to enact progress in your local and global communities. Political Hope empowers action and the change you wish to see in the world. Second is the Elevate to Legendary podcast by Dr. Nikki. It's a journey to activate your fullest self-expression. Dr. Nikki interviews leaders who have transcended perceived limitations in order to make meaningful impact. Guests share their stories to teach you how to optimize your body, brain, and spiritual connection to manifest a truly fantastic life. Search for Political Hope and Elevate to Legendary in your podcast app, or go to wedeepen.com/podcasts to listen to the new shows. This podcast of Deepen with Christina is sponsored by RelateFest. RelateFest is for people who are endlessly curious about relationships. It's happening March 4th through 6th in Miami, Florida. Enjoy 2.5 days of socializing, learning, connection, and play. The event will feature relationship experts holding interactive workshops, small group discussions, and immersive experiences. RelateFest covers topics like exploring pleasure, relationship boundaries, navigating conflict and jealousy, monogamy, non-monogamy, polyamory, discovering and communicating personal needs and desires, tantra, kink, BDSM, rebuilding trust after betrayal, attachment theory, dating, love, and more. If you're one of those people who like talking about relationships, this event is for you. Go to wedeepen.com/relatefest to learn more. You can also use special code DWC50 for $50 off the registration price. Again, that's wedeepen.com/relatefest. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Deepen with Christina. I'm your host, Christina Weber, founder of We Deepen, wedeepen.com. Make sure you go check out the calendar, wedeepen.com/calendar, and you will see all types of upcoming social and transformational experiences. Excited to share. This is 2022, lots of good stuff happening. And today I get to introduce you to Murray Hidary. Murray is the founder, creator of MindTravel. MindTravel is probably one of the my favorite experiences to promote through the network. And it's a little for me as being a founder and having this vision, it's like Murray's the type of person when I caught his attention, I was like, I'm making it. I'm making it because he is probably one of the most organized, well-respected facilitators of a transformational experience. MindTravel.com, you can go and you can see it for yourself. And even as I want to make this introduction, I have to share just some of the reviews of what people say about this experience. So what I say when, by the way, let me also rewind a moment. What is a mind travel experience? So he hosts these. At the first one I attended was on Santa Monica Beach behind Casa del Mar, a beautiful hotel, and brings a grand piano outside, not only to Santa Monica Beach, but to Central Park. And you put the silent disco headsets, those are the headsets that we use for silent discos, and he plays the piano, composes directly into the headset. So you have this meditative experience. It's, if any of us done any medicine work, it's a very ceremonial. You don't even, I mean, I'm sure sometimes people take mushrooms or whatever they want to journey through the experience, but you don't even need that. I had, when I've done it, I've had all types of epiphanies and breakthroughs, and also just a really special shared experience with friends that I've brought to enjoy those 2 hours with me. And not only do these experiences happen, in Central Park and on the beach, but also he guides walking meditations through mountains, through museums, or even virtually. COVID got us into the big bang of, before it's, MindTravel has happened in 45 cities. And now wherever you are in the world, you can tap into the magic of MindTravel. So this review that Megan had shared, I read it and I was like, I need to share this with you. So what Megan says is, it's literally as if Murray drops into the energy that resides at the deepest level of your being and plays the soundtrack to your soul. And because each time is always different, there is no duplicate experience. Just as in every moment, you are different. So they're unique and special expressions of who you are in the moment and translated into some of the most beautiful music you've ever heard. And it is so true. It is like a soul journey. It is like the soul soundtrack of your life. I have done ayahuasca before, numerous times. And during my ceremonies, there's always a moment where my life will replay, and I'll see the full 360 picture of my life. And that's what you get from these sorts of experiences. And one other review, unique one that I want to share with you, says MindTravel is an experience like no other. Imagine a concert pianist improvising beautiful, peaceful music with imagery in the background that matches the beauty of the music. Combined, it is almost meditative or trance-like. It really is trance-like. Murray, I know I just set you up with this powerful introduction, but it's true. I was always super stoked when we have MindTravel to share and promote on the We Deepen network, and to be able to work with you, and as being really interested in the industry of human connection or relationships or transformational experiences, you being a leader in the industry is also what gives me hope that we will succeed.
Well, thank you, Christina, and thank you for that beautiful and generous introduction. It's an absolute pleasure to be here with you in this conversation, to really try to bring, I guess, words to an experience that, for me, I created this experience because I couldn't find another way to express what I'm attempting to express through the music and through the whole experience collectively that I share through MindTravel. But I'll sure as heck try to put words to it so we can communicate really the philosophy, the ideas behind what's happening in the experience itself.
So give us, how do you describe it?
Yeah. So, for me, I turn to music, I would say, for two primary reasons. And by the way, neither of those are for entertainment or escape, which I think is probably the two primary reasons that many people turn to music generally, right? Kind of on a surface level. Again, not judging that in any way, but for me, music, starting at a very young age, became a means of expression for what I just couldn't find words easily to. And I think the first layer for me is emotional expression. And I think, like many people, expressing emotions using our words is challenging, maybe more so for men as well. So I found a more natural expression through music. And, we do call music the language of emotion. And there's a really specific reason for that. When words fall short, music kind of picks up the baton. And I think the reason for that is when we think about communicating an idea, whether it's an emotion or anything, we use words in a linear fashion. That's the only way we can use spoken language, right? We put one word in front of the other, one sentence in front of the other to communicate an idea. The other person then does the same thing, and we go back and forth. Now, if two of us do that at the same time, it's confusion and noise, right? But now let's go to music, right? Which also has a linearity to it, right? We can put one note in front of the other to create a melody, right? And communicate a beautiful melody. You can then respond with a beautiful melody with your instrument or voice, right? But something else is available in music. When we both do it at the same time, it's now no longer confusion and noise. It becomes what we call, of course, harmony. And it's not just available for two of us playing our respective instruments or singing, but you can do it with 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and 60 and 600. And it becomes grander and grander and communicates something that is truly ineffable. And that's what I'm really after, right, with music. Because from an emotional standpoint, we never are feeling one thing at a time, right? If you ask someone, well, how are you feeling right now? You're like, well, let's say, okay, yeah, I'm feeling, they might even label a certain emotion. They might say they're, feeling disappointment or sadness or jealousy, or they might be feeling anger, or you name it, right? But emotions are never as simple as that. They're always kind of operating like an iceberg, right? Where the main emotional driver is above the surface, but there's so much beneath the surface of the water, right? And it becomes something that we're actually, if we delve into that emotional state, we find many other emotions all tangled up, right? Mm-hmm. So it's never purely anger, right? It's always anger with lots of other stuff underneath the surface brewing, right? Mm-hmm. And with attention, right? With meditation, with bringing our presence to the emotion, sitting with it, feeling it, we can start to parse that out. And music is a facilitator for that, because it is in and of itself a multi-dimensional language, as we just pointed out. It's not just operating linearly, one at a time, but multi-dimensionally. Many things, many layers communicating at the same time, just like emotions are. Emotions are a multidimensional language. We feel it with our body, with our mind, with our heart, with our soul, every level. And we try to put language to it. And, it's helpful, but there's so much more going on beneath the surface. Music is the same way. And that's why it's so helpful in terms of untangling emotion, especially challenging and difficult emotion. Now, the second layer of that, I'll just mention quickly, and we can go into both more deeply, but the other layer of music for me is the exploration of consciousness. And that's something I've been interested, since I was a teenager. My adventures, I guess I'll call them, into consciousness, meditation, Eastern philosophy started at about 16 years old. When I picked up the book Siddhartha by Hermann Hesse, like many millions of us have, and many other books, of course, at that time, and just, I just dove in headfirst and never looked back. I just absolutely loved everything I was learning and reading and experiencing, and then eventually traveled overseas, living in Zen monasteries and the such. But music became the way to express the sensibilities that I was first grasping, right, through these readings, through these teachings, through these discourses, through these lectures, through these core, all these experiences. So those are the two layers for me, the two levels of what music has to offer. It's the emotional access and the deeper consciousness, what we might call spiritual access, although I don't even need to use that word, because I think it means so many different things to different people. So I'd rather say kind of a deeper consciousness experience, if I can.
I with MindTravel, it I think for me, as in hearing how you describe it, it did enable me to tap more deeply into my understanding of music. So what I mean by that is I didn't grow up in a family of musicians. Still, I recently did an RV travel with my father, and I got a ukulele to head out on the trip. And anytime I played one string, my dad would be like, "Oh, you need lessons." And so there's this thing inside of our family that we're musically inclined and or don't have that ability. And so a lot of times when I think of, language and music, it's really around the lyrics. What are the lyrics? What are they singing to me? And then I pick it up and I feel the emotions of whatever, song, maybe Alanis Morissette is You Ought to Know is singing in my head. And I'm like, yes, you ought to know. Yeah. But I think what a mind travel experience allows you to more, it's actually your own inner journey. And your own inner emotions. You're not necessarily picking up the stories, which is what I love. I love the lyrics of music. I love, love songs. That's what I listened to, all throughout my teens. And I would feel a lot of emotions. But as I grew up, first really starting is like, oh, I want to work with music. I want music in the background while I work, and it can't be distracting. So I can't get caught up in lyrics. So let me put on some classical music. And then now when you go do a mind travel experience, you tap into a different layer that some of us who didn't grow up playing instruments have then an ability to do.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think what you're pointing to is, if I can use a kind of an analogy in the art world, right? If you go to a museum and you sit in front of a realist painting, from the Renaissance or wherever, you can see what the subject is, what you're looking at, and sure, it could evoke a certain emotional state. Then you go to the gallery in the museum that has the abstract, right, artists. You have, now you're sitting in front of a Rothko, right? You're sitting in front of a Pollock, even a Van Gogh to a certain extent, though that kind of bridges both. Well, something else occurs, right? Instead of seeing specific detail, right, you're able to have an experience that transcends the literalism of a subject, right? The form of what might be presented. And now you're connecting on a different level, and you're able to layer your own details onto that particular abstract landscape, right? And so the artist is not telling you, this is a picture of X, subject Y, subject Z. You can layer that onto the canvas, right? And the colorscapes and the composition, the textures, all of those ingredients that the masterful artist, that he or she has created in this moment of visual expression, right, connects with you on some emotional, spiritual level, and you then layer your world onto it, right? And that's the power of abstraction, right? Because it's possible to do that through looking at a specific figure, but it's much easier to get lost in an abstraction and find whatever you need to find in it. And I think of music in the same way, right? If you listen to a pop song or, whatever song with lyrics and a kind of very identifiable, hummable, singable tune, right? That is the equivalent for me of kind of realism in the paint world and in the art world. But if you think in abstraction, right? That's what I'm bringing to the music is, how do I create abstraction through music where, you're not going to leave a mind travel humming, right, the hook, right, humming the chorus, right? There is no chorus to hum because it's a continuous winding journey down the river, right, musically. And sure, some of the parts have gorgeous, moving melodies, Some of the parts have despairingly melancholic moments. And yet it's not something you're going to walk away humming, yet you are filled with the sensibility that it's portraying.
Yes. I so true with all of that. So you have such a fascinating backstory, and you are a really interesting human being. And I'm definitely going to have you share some of the stories. But before, you started a company at 22, a tech company, successful, I believe, sold that company. And eventually you ended up into this experiential world, which is an interesting business decision, because as being working in the experience industry, it's a people-centric company. It's not as, I'll say, as like easy as throwing a product up on Amazon and then promoting light bulbs. Like, you are promoting a human experience. And as, being the founder, CEO of We Deepen, and going out to the world and telling them this is a viable business and you should, as an investor, invest into this world. It's also, it's also more laborious than other industries, and more nuanced, because we're navigating all types of income levels to and COVID. Our industry and the events industry, it was COVID definitely threw us for threw everything for a twist. How did you, and why did you, and what also keeps you in this world that necessarily, you don't go into this business for the money. And, it is a resource that takes us to actually grow the business and reach more people.
Yeah. Yeah. For me, I don't really have a choice in the matter. Like, for me, doing what I do is definitely not for the money, not for creating a business or anything like that. It really is because I just have to do it. I just have to be out there with people, sharing music, connecting through music, not just with people, but I know it sounds trite, but literally to the whole universe. Like, I do it through music. And whether it's with one person or 1,000, it doesn't matter. There's the power of connection, and music has such a purity to it and such an efficacy to it. Music just allows me to push aside all the human drama, the ego, right? Although you could carry it into it, but it enables me to actually push that aside, to show up. And the moment I sit down at that piano with that first note, I use that first note to just sound and clear the space so that I can just hopefully, desperately try to get myself out of the way and just be with the music so I can be with everyone in that moment, right? And that is something so worthwhile. If I look at all the ways I can spend my time with whatever amount of years I have left on this earth, and I really think that's how you have to think about it. All of us, you have a certain amount of time. We don't know if it's going to be a day or 50 years or more or less or whatever. But what are you going to do in that time? How are you going to spend that time? What is worthy of your time? And for me, it is without a doubt, unequivocally, unquestionably, it is sharing music in an experience that hopefully helps people elevate, transcend, grow. And by the way, I say it about others, but really it's about starting with myself. I do it for my own growth, for my own evolution, for my own stepping up into who I think I could become. So there's always a becoming and there's always a letting go, right? And that is possible through music if you use music in this way, right? Not again as entertainment and distraction. And I'm going to go out, have fun, listen to music, go to a band, and just like let go and have a drink. Like, okay, there's a validity to that in its own compartment, but we're talking here about something very, very different, right? Using music in a very, very different way.
I understand that part of, I don't know the word inspiration, but part of the what catalyzed mind travel into creation was a significant loss in your life.
Mm-hmm.
Do you ever think of what would happen to mind travel if Murray wasn't here? Is there a goal of will other people be providing mind travels or facilitating mind travel experiences?
Yeah, I had a conversation with a friend recently about legacy, right? About legacy. I think, when we think about, okay, how am I spending my time here? That's one thing. But then, what is the lasting impact, if any, and is that even a question worth pursuing or an answer worth pursuing? Mm-hmm. And here's where I ended up with it. Where I ended up with it is that legacy is less in something tangible or something you can specifically point to directly. And it's more in I guess I could say it's the rippling of what you've created, the ripples that have emerged and, spread out from what you're doing while you're alive. And so with each concert, with each mind travel experience, right? I know that I'm touching people in some way. Hopefully someone, right, will go into their lives, go back to their lives, and it might shift them in some way. And that ripple continues through them and through the people they touch, and so on and so on. These concentric circles of impact. Mm-hmm. And that's available to all of us, right? It's not just in what I do, but in each interaction that takes place. And I believe that is where legacy resides. So it resides in the impact you have with your closest circle of family and friends, colleagues, and it happens, in further concentric circles as the impact of who you are, ripples out. And I think thinking of it that way is very much as a process, and it's very much alive, So if someone were to say, where is mind travel? Can you point to it after, I die? Well, I would literally point to hopefully the way people are, the way they be, the way they conduct themselves, the way they think, in their own lives. And, that's less tangible. It's not a building. It's not a thing, right, with my name on it, right? Although, who knows, maybe that'll happen as well. And look, the nice thing about, music is that, yes, I mean, as much as there's nothing to replace the moment of improvisation and that anything can happen live, we do record them, and there is tremendous value in being able to go back and experience these things in your own time, in your own way. So there will always be a vast, library of recordings, but just both the music as well as the guided meditations, so that, you can do a walk on the beach. Hopefully someone in 100 years will be doing a walk on the beach, to my voice and my music, and, touching more deeply, right, the surfaces of love, right, the surfaces of sadness, and transmuting them through music. That would be my greatest, hope.
There have definitely been some nights where I have looked on Spotify and pulled up a mind travel journey and put my headset in and used your music to go to sleep at night. Yeah. Yeah. And I also really like thinking of legacy as, I mean, it's sort of what I even picked up from that. Mind travel is, I know that people have different connotations. This is where language gets in the way with medicine, but it is, taking a dose of medicine, and that is supportive for someone else's whole full life experience. And so that, I almost think of it, there's this network, and you're essentially participating in the network of someone else's existence, and supporting them through, it might be just in a moment of a 1 hour period of time that has some type of epiphany that then changes some other direction in their life. Or it might be a compilation of multiple experiences with a MindTravel experience.
No, and that's the thing. It's like the moment we really get that all of life happens in relationship. That's it. There's nothing else. There's no living, there's no life outside of a relationship of various kinds. I don't mean an intimate relationship, although that's one kind. And I'm not just talking about between people. Those are certain kinds of relationships, but there's a relationship between you and everything. That is the table you're sitting at, the glass you pick up, the water, the sky, the cloud, the tree you walk by. There is a relationship you have with everything around you. And it is your unique relationship because nobody has the perch on the universe, right? The perspective on the whole universe and the whole world that you individually and uniquely have in every moment. Even if someone is standing 1 foot next to you, side by side, right? Walking down the street, they will not have the same relationship and the same perch as you do because their interiority, their interior landscape, right, is different things going on. They see things differently. Why? Because we all see things from our past. That's the unfortunate mechanism of the human condition, right? So somebody sees, a tree, and they're going to relate it to their experience of a tree in the past. The person next to you might have fallen from a tree when they were a child and broken their leg, and they're going to see the tree in a different way, right? And so it's just the way we move through the world is all in relationship, and everyone has a different history they're bringing into each moment, right? Now, through the kind of work we all do, right, of coming to the present moment, of being able to put the past in the past, right? All this work is so beautiful and so critical and so welcoming because it actually frees and opens the mind to experience what is and not what we're projecting right onto it. And music can be this incredible canvas upon which this actually takes place, because without something to help us open up, right? Open the mind, open the heart, feel more, be in touch with it more. Don't be so closed off and shut down and ego-based and fear-driven, right? That's our de facto way we move, right? The status quo way we move through the world, because there's just so much coming at us. And so we almost kind of have to. And all of that is how humanity is wired. And so even if you're not that, you're going to bump into that, right? Like a pinball machine. You're going to bump into that every day, countless times. And so how do you navigate that? It's exhausting, emotionally, physically, spiritually exhausting. So how do you regenerate, rejuvenate, create energy so that you can show up and freaking smile in the face of all of that despair? Right. And I'm not being overly dramatic. It like really is like that.
You're totally speaking my language. I once, in one of my previous romantic relationships, during our getting to know each other process, I was always asking like, well, what's your relationship with alcohol? What's your relationship with social media? And it became like this joke that like we'd walk into a room and he'd be like, do you want to know my relationship with that picture on the wall?
Yeah, exactly.
And then also too, is like, then Facebook has this thing of like putting your relationship status, and you're like, what does that even mean? There's just at all life is relationship. I also just appreciate your energy in that journey that you just took us through. So when I first, I remember years ago when I first saw you speak, and you've spoke at TED, many other events, even too at a MindTravel experience. Yes, it's about music, and you mentioned also hearing your voice, and it's true at each of the experiences. There's always some type of message at the end that you so beautifully, eloquently articulate. I highly recommend that if you are a facilitator yourself, that you attend a MindTravel, even if it's just to hear how Murray facilitates and speaks to the group. But in that first time that I got to see you speak, it was at our mutual friend Craig and Sarah's house. And you had shared two really impactful stories. The first one, I always remembered, that story of when you were 18 in Fiji and you just had this wild adventure. And then I think it's what it like catapulted you into returning to New York City and starting a company. So I would love if you would share that story.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I think when I did share it on Craig's podcast, I think that the comments came back. People were so incredulous. They were like, how could this even happen? And every word of that is absolutely true. And I'll do my best to kind of take you through it here. So I was 18 and I had just graduated high school, started NYU. Even into my first semester as a freshman, I was already disillusioned with formal and institutional education, and I just wanted to see the world. I just had a hunger, a thirst to just get out there and experience the world directly. And that's because I came from a very parochial, a very closed off religious community in Brooklyn. And even though I was, just minutes from Manhattan, the cosmopolitan center of the world, it was as if I lived thousands of miles away because it was so kind of sectored off in my experience of the world. And so when I turned 18 and I was, free to do what I wanted to do, that's where I was driven to just go see the world. And I literally, Christina, I took a globe, those physical globes like that, one might get for their bar mitzvah. Like that is the globe I had in my, childhood room. And I just looked at the furthest place from Brooklyn, New York. And I said, I want to go there. And I pointed to the opposite part of our beautiful planet Earth. And it pointed to the South Pacific, to Australia, New Zealand, that whole region. And I went to Qantas Airlines. Now you got to remember, this is before the internet. Okay. If anyone listening could actually fathom that there was a life and a world and existence before the internet, I lived in it and I was 18 and there was no cell phone. There was no internet. I went to a physical airline store on Fifth Avenue. And I think it was 45th Street, walked into Qantas and they said, well, instead of just one stop, we have a ticket that gives you 7 stops for the same price. I said, great, where can I go? They said, well, the first stop from, going from New York to LA would be Fiji would be the, first stop on your flight. I said, great, sounds great. I'll go. I knew nothing about it. I read a little bit of history on the flight over, had no plans. And I just took a backpack. And when I went, I landed and on the bus ride from the airport to town, I get a tap on the shoulder and this beautiful Fijian man with a bright smile, his name was Waisake. And he says to me, where are you from? And we exchange pleasantries and start talking. And he eventually says, you must go to my village on this island. And I remember reading in this guidebook that the villages on these islands are not for tourists. They're living traditionally. He says, don't worry, just come with me. We get off the bus at the next stop where the fishing port was. And he takes me to this little fishing boat, puts me on it. There's a father and 2 teenage sons that are, a fisherman family. He gives them instructions and he writes me a little note in Fijian. And he says, when you get there, just show this to them. So I'm like, okay, sounds great. I'm 18 and I'm just like wide-eyed and naive and just like welcoming the universe. And I get on this boat and we set off in a little motorboat going out. And I figured I don't know, a couple hours we'll be there. Well, 2 hours turned to 4, turned to 1 day, turned to 2 days, until we finally got there. And we ate some rice and fish that we caught along the way. These young guys would actually jump in the water with spears and spear the fish and come back on the boat. I tried it, and I'd like to say I was successful at it, but I was not. I was not able to spear anything. I'm not even talking about a spear gun. It was like literally a physical stick. Like you'd have to poke it, like poking a fish. That's not going to happen for me. But they were masterful at it, and we boiled up some fish and rice, and that's what we ate for a couple of days. They got me to this island. I jumped out of the boat. They pulled away. And I walked up to the shore, and I couldn't see not one structure on this entire island. It was just palm trees as far as the eye could see. And a few minutes later, out of the greenery, out of the trees, these 3 men approached. And this one, like, just incredibly built, huge man, he comes up and he says, can I help you? And they all speak English there because the British occupied Fiji for so many years and brought education, amongst other things. And I quickly scramble for the letter, and I show them the letter, which is in Fijian. I did not know what it said. And he reads it, and he looks at me and he goes, Waisake sent you. Please come, you're our guest. And with a big sigh of relief, I walked with them through the trees, and we made our way to a clearing where there was a village, a traditional village of 143 Fijian villagers living collectively, and they would share everything. Everything was shared, a shared economy, shared life. One person needed a new house. They all built it. They shared everything. And it was the most beautiful lesson in human connection, human collection, how to live collectively, how to live sustainably. They worked farming and planting everything they needed. They fished, and then they bartered with other villages on nearby islands, which I did with them. I lived their life for months and months, waking up at 5 a.m. before it got too hot to go to the plantations and harvest and plant. Helping build a home with wood and straw when somebody needed it, and just led their life every day. At the end of each day, sitting in a big circle, the men and then the women in concentric circles, sharing stories traditionally, as they probably have done for centuries and centuries, if not millennia. And it was just a beautiful, pure, innocent time. No communication to the outside world. Nobody knew where I was. And finally, after 4 months of living in this village, I eventually made it back to the mainland and then continued my journey. And the rest of the year I spent on a bicycle because I wanted to just see all these places. And I felt like a bicycle was the best way because you're moving fast enough where you can get somewhere, right, versus walking. But you're not moving too fast, like a car or a train, or certainly a plane, where you're not going to stop and smell the roses, right? Mm. Like if you're driving, are you really going to pull over? Like really, maybe, but not really, on that little fruit stand or on that little shop, or to say hi to that little person, or, whatever it might be. So that's, that was a key way to do it. So that was a key way that that I traveled around the world. And after a year of that, I then, made my way back to New York and decided to go get my degree and formally study music, which I just knew was going to be my ultimate calling. The last experience I had before I did that actually was in Thailand. And I heard about a beautiful flute that they make up in Northeast Thailand. And I found the most renowned maker of these beautiful Thai flutes. And he made me one showed me how to play it, and I slung it over my arm and rode my bicycle back to Bangkok from the middle of nowhere. And I was just like, okay, I've done it. I've seen a good enough part of the world in this year. My eyes are open, my heart is open, my mind is open, and now I want to get the skills of music to translate everything I'm experiencing into compositions, into music that was my own voice. Which I always knew I had something to say with music, right? As opposed to playing the music of other people. So that was a key stage for me.
Such a fascinating story. First, when you arrived on the island, what was money exchanged there? Because it seemed like that you just jumped in and started building houses and sitting around the fire at night to tell stories.
Right. So the only money that I spent was I gave about the equivalent, I think, of maybe it was about $7 or $8 to the fisherman to take me on his boat for 2 days to this island. And then once I was there was no money exchanged. I basically just helped out. And, that's how I earned my keep. There was a family that looked after me to make sure I had everything I needed. But at least, they just kind of pointed the way of like, okay, now we're doing this and then we're doing that. And I just led their lifestyle and contributed as best as I could. I think at the end of the day, I'm sure that I, received more than I gave, but hopefully now I'm kind of paying it forward, if you will, in what I do and the experiences and sentiments that I learned, the lessons I learned, the wisdom I learned in that place.
Yeah, it totally. I mean, it also makes me think of, I know both you and I have spent time at Burning Man, and I'm sure that you've aware of the Robin Dunbar number, 150 people. They say that
right.
The human brain, the primate brain, can only handle 100 to 200 people. And when I hear that experience of you on that island and everyone supporting each other, there's no money necessarily exchanged, and telling stories at night. I feel like us who are in this transformational world, that's like something that we all dream of. We wish like a world would be like that. And then now fast forward, because you went there before the phone, before the internet. Now we are becoming so connected so quickly. How do you reconcile that experience of, hey, I'd love the world to be like that, and it feels sometimes when you step away from it that we're so far away from that?
Yeah, I think that's it's an important question. Is like, how do we live deliberately, really? And how do we do that in a sustainable way? When you organize in smaller groups, right? Like you're pointing out, that kind of notion of 150 people and being able to maintain a level of intimacy and communication that works at that level. But that at some point becomes impractical when we're living in urban environments, right? So how do we maintain that in a sustainable way? And I think that's where technology actually, look, it's a two-edged sword, right? We see, the downsides of how social technology can lead us astray and distract us and really create a mess. But we also can see the positive aspects of it as well, to keep people connected in an intentional way. So I think it's a question of how we consciously and deliberately use technology to facilitate that, especially in a world where so many of us are moving around more, living in different places and assembling and disassembling and assembling and disassembling, reassembling. So I think it becomes more about how do we intentionally move through that fluidity, right? Now with the whole blockchain trajectory that we're on, we look at, the invention, the creation of these DAOs, right? I think that's going to be such a critical part of our collective future, right? These rules that we establish for ourselves collectively, modify collectively, and allow us to govern ourselves, right? And I think that's really going to be a big part of it, not this top-down, centralized approach, but a decentralized, right, approach through DAOs, blockchain-supported platforms. I think that has to be a big part of this future, because otherwise there's no way to actually do it, and to have a bedrock of trust, right, that's operating underneath it all. You can have that when you're on a remote island because there's nowhere to run to, and there's accountability, and there's everything that comes with knowing everyone so intimately. But how do you do that with communities that are more fluid, coming in and out of each other, right? There you then need transparency, right? That's the only way to do it. You must have a transparent system, right, where everything's taking place, where there's no ability to hide agendas and activities that aren't going to be conducive to that. So I think that's our best shot at achieving that.
Mm. That's even, and I watch you as a leader, and that's one thing I focus on is transparency. Like, how do I build this organization, and do we continue to grow as being transparent with all stakeholders? It's a network. There's an array of a diverse group of guides and experiential brands, and buy-in. And I look at other companies that have done something similar that We Deepen has done, like say ClassPass. And when two, it's kind of this delicate dance, because you can look at talking to say ClassPass's, the fitness studios that have been part of that system. Some of them are like, yes, ClassPass was great, it brought me so many people. And others are like, they raped us. They took all our customers and they own the customers, and we didn't get anything. And now they've just sold. And so my desire is to build this as transparent as possible, and to be discerning as well, because there's that delicate dance between the two. So I am excited for the potential with the blockchain and the DAO, and talking a lot about that myself as well. So I want to ask one final question, and then share a little bit more about what's coming up with MindTravel. What is something, if you could wish for the world, like if you just had this, like, if everyone would just do this, like, or be this way, what would it be?
Well, being a musician, I think where my mind immediately goes to listening, right? And I think that lies at the core of any hope of healing, repair, connection, coming together. And I don't just mean listening, but I mean a deep listening, and there's such a distinction, there's such a difference, right, in just hearing what someone's saying and truly, like being in the listening. Because so much of us listen, again, as we said earlier, from the past, from our experience, that we're just projecting onto the other person. And it's very tough. It takes a lot of training. It takes a lot of attention to be able to listen clean, right? Without, preparing the next thing we're going to say, without our rebuttal. And it's just really tough. And we're not taught it, we're just not taught it. So I think if we can get that skill out there more, if more people possessed it, then there's a chance we can bridge divides. And it doesn't mean it's about convincing the other person of the other point of view, but at least that there becomes some kind of ability to coexist, right? And you got a shot at communicating, but a lot more compassion has to come into the art of listening. And it is an art, which is why it's so hard. But that would be my my hope.
I'm all for it. If I was to redesign the primary educational curriculum, I would include a course of how to listen. Who is the best listener that you know?
The best listener I know, I would say, hands down, is the ocean.
Okay, but you got to give me a person.
I
can't aim to be the ocean.
Well, why not?
Give me a role model.
If we all aim to be the ocean, we'd be in good shape. There are people in my life. They're not celebrities. They're not well known, but there's role models I've had for this in my life. My dad is one of them. He's able to set aside his own biases, prejudices, and ways of thinking to really just kind of hear and listen. And there's such a gentleness about him. And that's been a great role model. I've had other mentors as well. My main music professor was someone who taught me the art of listening, and not just in music, but in life. And I think, truly every walk in nature is a lesson in listening. And that's why I do the walks up in the mountains, right, with people. And it's not about talking to each other, but about listening, about being silent and listening to music, listening to nature. And there's a conversation to be had. The poet David White, one of my favorite poets, he talks about, the world that way, that he's in conversation with the landscape. And I love that. And it's something that I really take with me into every walk, whether I'm, walking to my car to go to do an errand, or whether I'm walking on the beach, at sunset, or walking in the mountains on a hike. There's a conversation that we're all in each moment with our surroundings, right? With the landscape, with the person in front of us, with, whatever it is. And what is the nature of that conversation? Because that conversation is taking place in your mind, whether you're aware of it or not. And so what is the nature of the conversation, which points to the nature of the mind? And then through that observation, through witnessing that, through bringing attention to that, we can get a glimpse of who we really are, which is not, right, the thoughts that are arising, but something that lays well beyond that.
I have to zip my lips right now because I could dive further into conversation about all of that with you. We just entered 2022. It's a whole new chapter, a whole new era. I'm actually, I've decided to label it as 2022 is the era of human connection.
Yeah.
What's in store for MindTravel this year?
So, to that point, the reason why I do, in-person events and virtual events is to bring people together with intention. And so we were able to come back together in person this past summer, and we're going to continue to do so. We've got a couple of ongoing series that we're developing in cities like Miami, New York, Los Angeles. In New York, we're in partnership with Sony Hall to create this immersive experience called MindTravel Elemental. It's actually using Sony's 360 reality audio technology, 50 speakers that surround the audience. And I created a naturescape. So, you live in Manhattan, the one thing that you're not getting enough of is nature, right? And so I bring nature to New Yorkers. And in the theater, the soundscape is everything from a rainstorm with thunder and lightning to waves and seagulls at the beach to underwater whales to songbirds and everything in between. And then I play the piano on top of this naturescape, all in 360 reality augmented audio. And so that's going to be a monthly a series that we're doing there. So anyone who's passing through New York, definitely look it up, and hopefully you can catch that. Miami, we're doing other in-person, both outdoor and on the beach in beautiful locations as well. We're gearing up the MindTravel underwater again.
Oh.
We're getting that back. I know. I remember you in the pool in LA.
Yeah, well, I have actually never been. I haven't gotten to go to it myself. But
okay.
Yeah, but I've been promoting it and sending other people to it. Maybe you're envisioning I was there. I almost feel like I have been there from looking at all the pictures and talking to everybody who has done it. I can't wait. I'm excited that's back.
So we looks like we've identified a magnificent pool overlooking the beach here in Miami, and we'll do it regularly, monthly there as well. And again, if those listening don't know what it is, you imagine floating in this, incredible saltwater pool, and the music is actually in the water through these underwater speakers that I put there, and I'm playing live and guiding the experience. And it's this otherworldly experience and childlike, where you are moving and dancing and playing and swimming underwater, and everyone just becomes this innocent energy of a child in that moment. Talk about connection. It's just beautiful. So all these different experiences, we're coming back. We're doing it. We were on a 70-city tour prior to COVID, 10 cities in, and we canceled, after 10 cities, we had to shut it down. But hopefully now we'll be able to bring some of that back, even amongst all this continued uncertainty. But we embrace it, and we move forward as best we can.
Cool. Thank you so much, Murray. And I'm excited to share those experiences. I know the listeners, you can go check it out at mindtravel.com. And also we will continue to share MindTravel's experiences at wedeepen.com as well. Thank you, Murray, for having this conversation with me, for all the work that you're doing in the world. It's important. I wake up every morning, I'm like, this is important work that we are doing. So thank you for that.
Thank you for the conversation. Really enjoyed it.
Thanks. If you enjoyed this podcast, please rate it, like it, leave a review. If you have any feedback, I welcome feedback. You can send me feedback at c@wedeepen.com. Also find me on Instagram, Christina Weber with 1B. And definitely go check out the calendar for 2022. Lots of exciting experiences. I'd love to meet you in person. Many other people would as well. Let's be together. Remember, this is the era of human connection. Thanks everyone for tuning in, and bye for now.